Exodus chapter 1. Names of the children of Israel, which came to Egypt, every man in his household came with Jacob: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah; Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin; Dan and Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. And all the souls that came out of the loins of Jacob were 70 souls, for Joseph was in Egypt already. And Joseph died, and all his brethren, and all that generation. And the children of Israel were fruitful, and increased abundantly, and multiplied, and waxed exceeding mighty, and the land was filled with them. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply. And it come to pass that when there falls out any war, they also join to our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. Therefore they did set over them taskmasters, to afflict them with their burdens. And they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Raamses. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew, and they were grieved because of the children of Israel. And the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor, and they made their lives bitter with hard bondage, in mortar and in brick and in all manner of service in the field. All their service wherein they made them serve was with rigor. And the king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives, of which the name of the one was Shiphrah, and the name of the other Puah. And he said, When you do the office of a midwife to the Hebrew women, and see them upon the stools, if it be a son, then you shall kill him. But if it be a daughter, then she shall live. But the midwives feared Yahweh, and did not as the king of Egypt commanded them, but saved the men children alive. And the king of Egypt called for the midwives, and said to them, Why have you done this thing, and have saved the men children alive? And the midwives said to Pharaoh, Because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women, for they are lively, and are delivered before the midwives come into them. Therefore Yahweh dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied, and waxed very mighty. And it came to pass, because the midwives feared Yahweh, that he made them houses. And Pharaoh charged all his people, saying, Every son that is born you shall cast into the river, and every daughter you shall save alive. End of chapter. Exodus chapter 2. And there went a man of the house of Levi, and took to wife a daughter of Levi. And the woman conceived, and bore a son. And when she saw him, that he was a goodly child, she hid him for 3 months. And when she could no longer hide him, she took for him an ark of bulrushes, and daubed it with slime and pitch, and put the child in it. And she laid it in the flags by the river's brink. And his sister stood afar off, to find out what would be done to him. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash at the river, and her maidens walked along by the river's side. And when she saw the ark amongst the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. And when she had opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby wept. And she had compassion on him, and said, This is one of the Hebrew children. Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, Shall I go and call to you a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for you? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, Go. And the maid went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, Take this child away, and nurse it for me, and I will give you your wages. And the woman took the child and nursed it. And the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she called his name Moses. And she said, Because I drew him out of the water. And it came to pass in those days, when Moses was grown, that he went out to his brethren, and looked upon their burdens, and he spied an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his brethren. And he looked this way and that way, and when he saw that there was no man, he slew the Egyptian, and hid him in the sand. And when he went out the second day, behold, 2 men of the Hebrews strove together. And he said to them that did the wrong, Why are you striking your neighbor? And he said, Who made you a prince and a judge over us? Do you intend to kill me as you did kill the Egyptian? And Moses feared, and said, Surely this thing is known. And now when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh, and dwelt in the land of Midian. And he sat down by a well. And now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came near, and drew water, and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. And the shepherds came, and drove them away. But Moses stood up, and helped them, and watered their flock. And when they came to Reuel, their father, he said, How is it that you are come so soon today? And they said, An Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, and also drew water enough for us, and watered the flock. And he said to his daughters, Where is he? And why is it that you have left the man? Call him, so that he may eat bread. And Moses was content to dwell with the man, and he gave Moses Zipporah, his daughter. And she bore him a son, and he called his name Gershom. For he said, I have been a stranger in a strange land. And it came to pass in process of time that the king of Egypt died, and the children of Israel sighed by reason of the bondage, and they cried, and their cry came up to Yahweh by reason of the bondage. And Yahweh heard their groaning, and Yahweh remembered his covenant with Abraham and Isaac and with Jacob. And Elohim looked upon the children of Israel, and Yahweh had respect to them. End of chapter. Exodus chapter 3. Now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the backside of the desert, and came to the mountain of Yahweh, to Horeb. And the angel of Yahweh appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. And Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burnt. And when Yahweh saw that he turned aside to see, Yahweh called to him out of the midst of the bush, and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. And he said, Do not draw near here. Put off your shoes from off of your feet, for the place whereon you stand is holy ground. Moreover, he said, I am the Elohim of your father, the Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Isaac, and the Elohim of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon Yahweh. And Yahweh said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people which are in Egypt, and have heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. And I am come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land unto a good land, and a large, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Now, therefore, behold, the cry of the children of Israel is come to me, and I have also seen the oppression wherewith the Egyptians oppress them. Come now, therefore, and I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring forth my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. And Moses said to Yahweh, Who am I, that I should go to Pharaoh, and that I should bring forth the children of Israel out of Egypt? And he said, Certainly I will be with you, and this shall be a token to you, that I have sent you. When you have brought forth the people out of Egypt, you shall serve Yahweh upon this mountain. And Moses said to Yahweh, Behold, when I come to the children of Israel, and shall say to them, The Elohim of your father has sent me to you, and they shall say to me, What is his name? What shall I say to them? And Yahweh said to Moses, I am that I am. And he said, Thus shall you say to the children of Israel, I am has sent me to you. And Yahweh said moreover to Moses, Thus shall you say to the children of Israel, Yahweh, Elohim of your fathers, the Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Isaac, and the Elohim of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this is my memorial to all generations. Go, gather the elders of Israel together, and say to them, Yahweh, Elohim of your fathers, the Elohim of Abraham, of Isaac, and Jacob, appeared to me, saying, I have surely visited you, and seen that which is done to you in Egypt. And I have said, I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt to the land of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, to a land flowing with milk and honey. And they shall listen to your voice. And you shall come, you and the elders of Israel, to the king of Egypt, and you shall say to him, Yahweh, Elohim of the Hebrews, has met with us. And now let us go, we beseech you, 3 days' journey into the wilderness, that we may sacrifice to Yahweh, our Elohim. And I am sure that the king of Egypt will not let you go, no, not by a mighty hand. And I will stretch out my hand, and strike Egypt with all my wonders which I will do in the midst of it. And after that he will let you go. And I will give this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. And it shall come to pass that when you go, you shall not go empty. But every woman shall borrow of her neighbor, and of her that sojourns in her house, jewels of silver and jewels of gold and raiment, and you shall put them upon your sons and upon your daughters, and you shall spoil the Egyptians. End of chapter. Exodus chapter 4. And Moses answered and said, But behold, they will not believe me, nor listen to my voice, for they will say, Yahweh has not appeared to you. And Yahweh said to them, What is that in your hand? And he said, A rod. And he said, Cast it on the ground. And he cast it on the ground, and it became a serpent, and Moses fled from before it. And Yahweh said to Moses, Put forth your hand, and take it by the tail. He put forth his hand, caught it, and it became a rod in his hand. That they may believe that Yahweh, Elohim of their fathers, the Elohim of Abraham, and the Elohim of Isaac, and the Elohim of Jacob, has appeared to you. And Yahweh said furthermore to him, Put now your hand to your bosom. And he put his hand into his bosom, and when he took it out, his hand was leprous as snow. And he said, Put your hand into thy bosom again. And he put his hand into his bosom again, and plucked it out of his bosom, and behold, it was turned again as his other flesh. And it shall come to pass, if they will not believe you, neither listen to the voice of the first sign, that they will believe the voice of the latter sign. And it shall come to pass, if they will not believe also these two signs, neither listen to your voice, that you shall take of the water of the river, and pour it upon the dry land, and the water which you take out of the river shall become blood upon the dry land. And Moses said to Yahweh, O Yahweh, I am not eloquent, neither before nor since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech, and of a slow tongue. And Yahweh said to him, Who has made man's mouth? Or who makes the dumb or deaf or the seeing or the blind? Have not I, Yahweh? Now, therefore, go, and I will be with your mouth, and teach you what you shall say. And he said, O Yahweh, send, I pray you, by the hand of him whom you will send. And the anger of Yahweh was kindled against Moses, and he said, Is not Aaron the Levite your brother? I know that he can speak well. And also, behold, he comes forth to meet you. And when he sees you, he will be glad in his heart. And you shall speak to him, and put words in his mouth. And I will be with your mouth, and with his mouth, and will teach you what you shall do. And he shall be your spokesman to the people. And he shall be, even he shall be to you instead of a mouth, and you shall be to him instead of Yahweh. And you shall take this rod in your hand, and with it you shall do signs. And Moses went and returned to Jethro, his father-in-law, and said to him, Let me go, I ask you, and return to my brethren which are in Egypt, and see whether they be yet alive. Jethro said to Moses, Go in peace. And Yahweh said to Moses in Midian, Go, return to Egypt, for all the men are dead which sought after your life. And Moses took his wife and his sons, and set them upon an ass, and he returned to the land of Egypt. And Moses took the rod of Yahweh in his hand. And Yahweh said to Moses, When you go to return to Egypt, see that you do all those wonders before Pharaoh, which I put in your hand, but I will harden his heart, that he shall not let the people go. And you shall say to Pharaoh, Thus says Yahweh, Israel is my son, even my firstborn. And I say to you, Let my son go, that he may serve me. And if you refuse to let him go, behold, I will slay your son, even your firstborn. And it came to pass by the way, in the inn, that Yahweh met him and sought to kill him. And then Zipporah took a sharp stone and cut off the foreskin of her son, and cast it at his feet, and said, Surely a bloody husband you are to me. And so he let him go. And then she said, A bloody husband you are, because of the circumcision. And Yahweh said to Aaron, Go into the wilderness to meet Moses. And he went and met him in the mount of Yahweh, and kissed him. And Moses told Aaron all the words of Yahweh who had sent him, and all the signs which he had commanded him. And Moses and Aaron went and gathered together all the elders of the children of Israel. And Aaron spoke all the words which Yahweh had spoken to Moses, and did the signs in the sight of the people. And the people believed. And when they heard that Yahweh had visited the children of Israel, and that he had looked upon their affliction. Then they bowed their heads and worshipped. End of chapter. Exodus chapter 5. And afterward Moses and Aaron went in and told Pharaoh, Thus says Yahweh, Elohim of Israel, Let my people go, that they may hold a feast to me in the wilderness. And Pharaoh said, Who is Yahweh, that I should obey his voice and let Israel go? I do not know Yahweh, neither will I let Israel go. And they said, The Elohim of the Hebrews has met with us. Let us go, we ask you, 3 days' journey into the desert, and sacrifice to Yahweh our Elohim, lest he fall upon us with pestilence or with the sword. And the king of Egypt said to them, Why do you do this, Moses and Aaron? Let the people off from their work? Get you to your burdens. And Pharaoh said, Behold, the people of the land now are many, and you make them rest from their burdens. And Pharaoh commanded the same day the taskmasters of the people and their officers, saying, You shall no more give the people straw to make brick as before. Let them go and gather straw for themselves. And the number of the bricks which they did make before, you shall lay upon them. You shall not diminish any of it, for they are idle. Therefore they cry, saying, Let us go and sacrifice to our Elohim. Let their more work be laid upon the men, that they may labor in it, and let them not regard vain words. And the taskmasters of the people went out, and their officers, and they spoke to the people, saying, Thus says Pharaoh, I will not give you straw. Go, get your own straw where you can find it. Yet not any of your work shall be diminished. So the people were scattered abroad throughout all the land of Egypt to gather stubble instead of straw. And the taskmasters hasted them, saying, Fulfill your work, your daily tasks, as when there was straw. And the officer of the children of Israel, which Pharaoh's taskmasters had set over them, were beaten and demanded, Why have you not fulfilled your task in making brick both yesterday and today, as before? And then the officers of the children of Israel came and cried to Pharaoh, saying, Why do you so deal with us and with your servants? There is no straw given to your servants. And they say to us, Make brick, and behold, your servants are beaten. But the fault is your own people. But he said, You are idle. You're idle. Therefore you say, Let us go and do sacrifice to Yahweh. You go therefore now and work, for there shall no straw be given you. Yet shall you deliver the number of bricks. And the officers of the children of Israel did see that they were evil, after it was said, You shall not deduct any from your bricks of your daily task. And when they met Moses and Aaron, who stood in the way as they came forth from Pharaoh, and they said to them, Yahweh look upon you and judge, because you've made our savor to be hated in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of his servants, to put a sword in their hand to slay us. And Moses returned to Yahweh and said, Yahweh, why then have you so evil entreated this people? Why is it that you have sent me? For since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has done evil to this people. Neither have you delivered your people at all. End of chapter. This chapter 6.